Great. Well, it's 1:32. Let's go ahead and get started. Hello, I'm Kevin Futhey, Executive Director of Commute Seattle. Welcome to Transportation Transformations. We are really glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us today. First, we want to cover just a couple of housekeeping items for this virtual event. You will be able to see and hear us as the presenters, but we cannot see or hear you. So go ahead and kick back and relax. There are going to be a couple of ways for you to interact throughout this event. However, we'll have a couple of audience polls that pop up throughout the opening remarks. And so we invite you to participate in those polls. And then if you do have questions, we hope that you do, please ask them using the Q&A box at any time. There's going to be some time toward the end of the event today for us to get to those questions. And then finally, the slides and recording of this event are going to be emailed out later on this week for you to review and share if you'd like. But before we dive in further, just want to share with you a brief video that we produced at Commute Seattle that showcases our work.
The way we move through Seattle has changed. A new normal has taken shape. And Seattle continues to rise to the challenge. We have shown our ability to deliver while keeping our distance. When we work together, Seattle moves. Learn how Commute Seattle's free business services can help you create safer commutes for your employees.
So again, thanks for joining us for this year's Transportation Transformations. We're coming up on the end of a very challenging year. Maybe that's the understatement of the year. But we want this event to be a hopeful look ahead to the future of mobility in our city and the way transportation can help us recover and create a more equitable, healthy community for everyone. We really believe that that's possible. And to help us do that, we're honored to have a great panel of local experts with us today. In just a bit, we're going to hear from them and give you all that opportunity to ask questions as well. But first, if I may, I wanted to take just a moment to say a quick word about Commute Seattle and spend a few moments looking at the state of the commute as it exists here at the end of 2020. So first off, Commute Seattle's mission is to foster mobility partnerships and services that keep Seattle moving and thriving for all. We were founded in 2004, and we partner with employers and property managers, offering a one-stop shop for free transportation support. We offer a variety of services, and to get a better sense of our audience, we want to do a quick poll to see how everyone with us today has engaged with Commute Seattle in the past. So you should see how you or your business has worked with Commute Seattle before. The results are coming in real time here. A lot of TMPs, CTR program, ORCA programs. So yeah, it's kind of all over the map. We're really proud to have such a wide audience of folks joining us today. So thank you again for being here. We serve both large and, okay, here's the final results. CTR program, 59%. We serve large businesses and small businesses, property managers of large buildings downtown and smaller buildings citywide. So no matter which program that you've worked with us primarily in, we welcome you. Thanks for playing along with our first poll. Just a couple of weeks ago, Commute Seattle unveiled our new website and our new brand. So if you've worked with us in the past, you might notice that things have changed a little bit. We hope that you'll visit our new website at commuteseattle.com, sign up for our monthly newsletter, check out our webinar recordings, and take a look at future events as well, including one later this week for property managers. And before we move on to our panel now, I just want to say a couple of words about the state of the commute in Seattle. It seems like so long ago now, but we started this year reporting our 2019 Center City Modesplit survey results. And then almost immediately afterward, the world of commuting, like everything else, was fundamentally changed by COVID. One of the key findings of that survey was that telework was the fastest growing commute mode for 2019, but it still accounted for less than 6% of Center City workers. So fast, but very small slice of the pie overall. In 2020, of course, COVID supercharged teleworking. Many people teleworked for the first time, and companies that maybe didn't allow it or discouraged it suddenly had to adjust and find ways to make it work. People adapted, and it seemed like almost overnight, everyone who could work from home was working from home. Today, roughly half of the workers in the Seattle metro area have switched to a telecommute. That's one of the highest rates in the nation. So on the topic of telecommuting, we have another quick poll question for everyone. We're curious to know, looking ahead now longer term, after many of us have been telecommuting now for 7-8 months, what is your preferred frequency of teleworking going forward into next year? Yes, so after COVID, perhaps would be another way to put this, or as we move through the recovery, what will be your preferred telework frequency? Several days a week seems to be the winning out. Once a week, maybe in second place. 7% say get me back to the office. Okay, several days a week. Nice. Thanks for again for playing along with our polls. Not everyone can telework or work remotely though, right? For many people, including those who work in sectors like the medical sector, retail, hospitality, there is no telework option. Many of our essential frontline workers never stopped commuting, and many of them are still riding transit. Our local transit agencies, despite taking a big hit, have themselves adapted and still serve tens of thousands of essential workers every day. And our transit system is an important lifeline for many communities. We don't know how long it will take for transit ridership to get back up to pre-COVID levels, but there's reason to believe that the future for transit in our region is bright. And frankly, it needs to be bright because we can't move all the people without transit. Like you saw in the Modesplit chart, the majority of folks coming into the center city for work used transit pre-COVID. Last month, Seattle voters emphatically approved by more than 80% an extension of the Seattle Transportation Benefit District to fund transit service and programs that expand access to transit for youth and those with low incomes. Furthermore, 3 new light rail stations will be opening next year as Link extends to Northgate, with stops in the University District and Roosevelt along the way. And all told, voter-approved light rail expansion will bring 28 new stations over the next 4 years as Link heads north to Linwood, east across the lake to Bellevue and Redmond, and south to Federal Way. So one final quick fun poll question for everyone. Once Northgate Link opens next fall, what light rail adventures will you be going on? There we go. The results are coming in. I thought taking light rail from end to end was going to do better because that's what I'm going to do. take it to a game or concert. I can't wait for those to start back up again. Spreading the word at my organization is one. Well, thank you all for being evangelists of light rail. We really appreciate that. So a couple more points I wanted to make before we head over to the panel discussion. It's not just the service itself that made transit the top commute mode for our city. It's also the fact that so many employers offer a transit pass benefit and commute benefits. Encouragingly, the vast majority of employers are maintaining those benefits right now or are planning to bring them back once on-site work resumes for their businesses. And then finally, active commuting is another area that continues to grow. We've seen bike sales go through the roof during the stay-at-home and pandemic that we've been going through as people look for ways to socially distance while getting exercise. The city's made it easier, introducing 20 new miles of stay healthy streets, adding to the almost 200 miles of bike lanes, trails, and neighborhood greenways across the city. Walking, biking, and rolling to work is poised to see a continued increase as commuters look for ways to stay socially distanced over the near term. We hope a lot of that behavior will continue as people use those modes over the long term. But obviously there are going to be challenges. I'm definitely looking for the silver linings in all of this, but there are challenges. The closure of the West Seattle Bridge is one example. Helping workers get around this obstacle is going to be a big body of work for Commute Seattle and for a lot of you on the call over the next year and a half. For those already teleworking, obviously keeping that going throughout the duration of this closure is going to be crucial. For those who have to make the trip, transit, carpools, van pools, and active modes are going to be the best way to keep them out of congestion and avoiding those impacts to the local communities along detour routes. So we look forward to overcoming COVID-19 with vaccines, hopefully rolling out very soon. We know things won't be changing overnight. The new normal will almost certainly look different from the old normal, and that's true for commuting as well. One of the biggest long-term changes we hope to see, though, is that more commuters do become multimodal. That is, they might get to their jobs by transit some days, active commutes, other days, teleworking when it's possible, and driving only when it's really necessary. Pre-COVID, only about 25% of center city workers were driving alone to work, and more than a third used more than one commute mode throughout the week. So we already do have the beginnings of a multimodal commuting population. But a permanent increase in this kind of flexibility for commuters would mean that we can use our transportation resources more efficiently, more sustainably, and more equitably. And that might be a great silver lining to this situation. And we at Commute Seattle can't wait to partner with you all to make that happen. So to dive into these topics a bit further, we'd like to introduce today's panel. So, Alex Hudson is Executive Director of Transportation Choices Coalition. Alex is an advocate for people-centered planning and design who works strategically with a variety of partners to ensure transportation funding, policies, and systems create the most good for the largest number of people. Alex was previously the Executive Director of the First Hill Improvement Association and sits on the board of the Freeway Park Association. Welcome, Alex. Sam Zimbabwe is the Director of the Seattle Department of Transportation. Before coming over to SDOT, Sam had senior management roles at the District Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C., first as the Associate Director for Policy, Planning, and Sustainability. He moved on to become DDOT's first Chief Project Delivery Officer, responsible for planning, capital project design and construction, traffic engineering, and signals, and transit service delivery. So welcome, Sam. And finally, with us today, we have Bill Bryant. Bill is Managing Director of Service Development at King County Metro Transit. His responsibilities include overseeing Metro scheduling, transit route facilities, rapid ride, and service planning teams. He's been working in local transit since 1998. So welcome to Bill. At this point, yeah, it looks like everyone's got their cameras on, and you can go ahead and um, unmute your microphones. I have a few questions that we'll start out with, and then we'll get to the audience Q&A questions, and my colleague Nick is going to bring forward those questions from the audience. Again, if the audience thinks of any questions, go ahead and type those into the Q&A box here as we go. My first question is on COVID. The pandemic has really forced us all to come together and collaborate, to partner with one another, to adapt and to be resilient. But a lot of people and organizations have found that this is a time to come together. I'm curious how COVID has helped your organizations to reach out, to create new partnerships, and to find collaborations. Maybe Alex, we can start with you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's good to see everyone, and I'm delighted to be here. And thank you to the participants for sharing your afternoon with us. The Transportation Choices Coalition's entire theory of change is rooted in the idea that transit and transportation sits at the figurative and literal intersection of virtually every aspect of our lives. That it's how we get to work, it's how we get things delivered to us, or how we get to the things to buy them ourselves. It's how we get to healthcare and to schooling, and prior to when we were all required to be locked in our houses permanently, we were all going places, and that requires a transportation system that can get you there. So I would say, the strength of TCC is that we've really viewed the world, and we've viewed this issue around transportation with side-by-side partners in public health, in social justice and racial equity, in community safety, in labor, in the environment. And while it, of course, virtual facilitation is a very different kind of thing than getting together in the same room and talking about these fun and important issues, we've really relied on the strength of our partnership and our worldview in order to not just address the immediate challenges presented by COVID, but to develop a really ambitious and innovative framework for how the heck we're going to get out of this mess and build a better world on the other side.
That's great, Alex. Thanks. Bill, how about your organization at Metro?
I would say a couple things in response to that. I think first and foremost, this crisis has really connected us with a subset of our ridership and our customer base that needs us more than all others do. King County Metro is fairly unique among large bus agencies in that we have a very large percentage of choice riders who ride Metro, even though they could drive or they could use another mode. But through this crisis, we've discovered that, and it's confirmed what we knew, but put a real sharp point on it, which is that there's a huge percentage of our riders that depend on us that actually have no other choice. And these are the essential workers that are getting around to frontline jobs, whether it's in retail or healthcare or anything in between. I would also say that this has really allowed us to retrench with our agency partners like SDOT, WashDOT, Sound Transit, State Ferries. We are all in this together, and fortunately, previous challenges like the waterfront project or the West Seattle Bridge really prepared us to take on these problems head on as a group. And so I've really appreciated that we've been able to get together with our agency partners and prepare to take on the recovery challenge now.
Thanks, Bill, for that. And Sam?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in on this too. I'll echo what both Bill and Alex have said. And, I think the other place that for us at SDOT, it's been interesting to see how we can, what we've been able to do differently during this pandemic response is bringing together some of our public stakeholders as well into new formats. The evening public meeting or the daytime open house makes it really challenging for a large cross subsection of the population to participate meaningfully in a lot of our work. And something like the West Seattle Bridge emergency also enabled us to find new ways to engage with people. We've convened a task force entirely virtually. We've streamed all of those meetings. We've been very transparent in how we've run the organization. And that's been something new and exciting for us that I think can help carry us forward into the future. I long for the days when we could all stand around a table and point at maps, but I also think we can learn from what we've been able to do and figure out how we can engage people using these new platforms as well.
Well, that's great. And for Commute Seattle's part, our again, I would just plug that our organization was founded on the concept of partnerships between Metro, between SDOT, between our transit agencies, and our employers and property managers. So we are many of those whom are here on the call today. So again, we appreciate you guys for being here and partnering with us to be able to deliver this event. My next question is regarding transportation equity, and I know that's near and dear to all of your hearts. As Bill kind of mentioned, this has revealed some of the characteristics of our transit system and the equity components to the ridership that still exists very strongly today for certain populations, and then less so for others. But for the year ahead, as we look to 2021, and as we consider the vote that we just had on the Transportation Benefit District, what role do you see this conversation around equity and building a more equitable city, a more equitable transportation system? Where do you see that headed over the year ahead? Alex, you want to start off?
I think that it's at the front and the center of every conversation that we should be having. If we want to live in a better world, then we should start by identifying the things that aren't working and fix those. And right now, what we know is that society, including transportation, is simply not working for Black, Indigenous people of color. And that is true in Seattle, and that is true in Washington, and that is true everywhere in this country. And so I find it very exciting to think about the ways that we can create a transformed mobility for people by starting by thinking about transportation equity. And I think where that comes is, we've all made important statements, and each of these institutions that are represented here, SDOT and Metro, have institutionalized and structuralized equity analysis and decision making, as do the governments that they operate under. So TCC really seeks to have this become part of the DNA of institutions, and are excited about the work that both the city and the county are doing in that regard. And the fact of the matter is it's really important, right? So Bill was sort of alluding to this, is that we know that there's disparities. The transit and transportation system, while it is delivering to choice riders, the flip side, or the other component that we think about, are transit dependent people, who are really the foundation of our transit and transportation systems. And we know that the disparities that exist in society exist there as well. So as an example, right, 20% of people in the city of Seattle and in this region don't own a car. That number is 40% for Black households. So we know that for white people, 1 out of every 10 trips is a transit trip. For Black households in this region, it's 1 out of 6. So Black, Indigenous, people of color households really represent the foundation of our clients. And so when we start to think about how can the transit system meet the needs of our clients, then it becomes the virtuous circle creation by making a system that works for the people who count on it the most, as opposed to an orientation that's really about attracting people away from their alternatives. I, of course, firmly believe in a world and envision a world where we're all on transit as a rich and usable option for us. But I do believe that by starting by the people who count on transit the most, and as we're rebuilding our transit systems and investing important service hours in our frequency of our network, that if we start where the gaps are, then we'll build a system that works really excellently for everyone.
great, Alex. And totally agreed. Curious what Bill has to say on that.
I'll try to keep it a little bit short because there's so much here. But I would say that King County and King County Metro and of Seattle, for that matter, have long been leaders in trying to provide services equitably. But coming into this crisis towards the second half of last year and the early part of this year, we were really stepping up our game in terms of developing a mobility framework, a mobility equity framework, and new policies that focus much more clearly on equity than even we had been previously. And so when the pandemic hit, everybody scrambled to try to keep things operating, but that was followed very shortly thereafter. I think for all of us, time has been a little bit distorted for the last several months, but that was followed by the George Floyd protests and the series of other issues on the national stage, the presidential campaign, that put equity even more solidly at the forefront. So that's sort of one piece of the backdrop that we're all we're searching for opportunities within this backdrop. Down at a much more granular level on the street as regards transit in Seattle and King County and the region, you know, we just saw snap poll results in this meeting that showed that there's going to be significant telecommuting going forward permanently. It's not going to be everybody. It's likely to be 2 or 3 days a week for the average white collar worker. That's just, we do need to remember that that's just one segment of the workforce, but it's still going to be significant teleworking. So that's likely to reduce peak demand. We will still have peak demand, but not quite as much. One way to look at it is the growth curve for peak demand is going to drop before it continues on its upwards trajectory. But there's an opportunity there, which is to reallocate some of the funding that provides peak service, or did pre-COVID provide peak service, to other times of the day and potentially other parts of the county where needs are greater.
Sam, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just jump in really briefly to say a couple things. You know, first is I think that the pandemic and the resultant economic fallout has really shown again where we had these underlying disparities in our community, and the need to continue to make equity focused investments in infrastructure and in service, and in how we provide sort of help people overcome the access barriers that exist to transit. And we do that partly through our fare programs, but also partly through helping people navigate the system and really understand how transit can be useful. I think that we risk, when we talk about transit dependent populations and and separate people out from riders of choice, we can almost think that we can provide any old service for transit dependent populations and it'll be okay. But those are often the shift workers who need to be at their jobs at a certain time, who have much more rigidity and challenges in getting to and from childcare and services and healthcare appointments and things like that, and that they deserve the same same choice modes and make the same investments that enable them to use transit to lower those barriers, those transportation barriers, rather than think that, you know, just any old service will work for those populations. I also think that when we saw some of the health impacts early on in the pandemic, and we made decisions like creating the Stay Healthy Streets program and really trying to upgrade our greenway system to make transportation and recreation accessible to everybody throughout the city, we saw where we have disparities in park access and in biking and walking access across the city. And we'll continue to be guided by those equity principles and making sure that we provide meaningful access to everybody throughout the city, and really work to overcome the historic inequities in investment across our city. The last thing I'll say is, you know, we've, over the course of the last year, we've been convening, in a little bit more than a year, we've been convening a transportation equity work group as part of how we work to help define and set the agenda for transportation equity going forward for SDOT. And it's been really wonderful to work with this group of stakeholders who, in thinking about the principles of transportation equity, are often not talking directly about the bus or the street or things like that, but about how, as Alex said, that transportation intersects with so many other aspects of people's daily lives around economic development and housing and gentrification and displacement, and how we can use our investments in the transportation system to really overcome some of those other challenges that people face in those intersectional areas of their lives.
Yeah, getting back to something that Bill had mentioned, I think about kind of the peak commute versus other times of day, what it might look like going forward through the recovery and beyond. Would it be good for the system to have flatter peaks? If our employers that are on the call today or our property managers, I mean, if we incentivized commuters to come in early or later instead of all trying to pile in at the same time, obviously that could have benefits for kind of social distancing on its own. But are there real transportation system benefits to spreading the peak out? And would anyone like to speak to that?
Sure, I can speak to that. I think our commute, our volumes of vehicles coming into and out of downtown remain very low compared to normal levels. I think we're still down about 20 to 30% on 24-hour counts coming into and out of downtown. As we move towards recovery, I don't know if folks who haven't been commuting a lot recently remember how unpleasant it used to be. Now I'm mostly working from my house. My commute from downstairs to upstairs is pretty good. I usually get to my meetings on time in the morning, but it was, this time of year, dark, rainy, it was not always so fun to commute. But I think it'll really depend if everybody of those people who commute a couple of days a week do it on the same day at the same time, we'll be right back there with having some pretty unpleasant commutes. If we can figure out how to collectively across, major employers, government, sort of match up some of, and like you said, Kevin, smooth out some of the demand, make it so that people aren't all teleworking on Monday and Friday and commuting Tuesday through Thursday, or people figure out how to flex their schedules like we were doing during the peak of the squeeze. I think we can really use the capacity that we have within our transportation system and make it better for everybody, and provide people with that reliability and sort of more pleasant aspects of a commute, which transit usually provides. But even transit gets stuck in traffic when we can't address some of these other frictions that we have. So it gives us a great opportunity as people come back and travel more, to have that not be as unpleasant as an experience as it sometimes used to be.
Yeah, I'd add a couple things to Sam's comments. Once you get near capacity in a transportation system, you start seeing some inherent inefficiencies. And for transit, it's that you might have to send a bus out to run a single trip and go back to the base, just to keep passenger loads manageable. For the roadway system, it's when that number of vehicles hits that capacity wall, it. And we've seen that happen repeatedly over the years when the economy has sort of hit its peaks. Traffic has slowed down, buses have gotten very full, and there's only so much that the public agencies can do to respond to those things. Capacity is a very real thing. And I think about Sam's comment about the days of the week. I'm at least as concerned about teleworking occurring uniformly across the calendar week, or the weekdays at least, than about the peak commute period during each day at this point. But I think that both of those issues are very, very real, and there are opportunities to just reorganize service and reorganize expectation in a way that takes advantage of whatever this new set of transit patterns and transportation patterns looks like. But I would also say that one of the reasons why transit is so competitive is because SDOT and other jurisdictions have provided so much priority for transit over other traffic. As traffic dies down, that advantage might start to dissipate a little bit. So what can we do to help transit become more attractive in other ways? Similarly, if parking demand is down for any specific periods, does that mean the price of parking comes down and then suddenly driving alone becomes more attractive again? So I think that these are all puzzle pieces that we're going to need to work together on, because the benefits of non-motorized travel, and I include transit in that, are just so clear in terms of the environment, the community, city building, and frankly, employer costs, that we need to work together to maintain that advantage for transit.
I would just say the only thing I would add to that is Los Angeles, their system down there did an analysis about gender, and it's called Women in Transit. I'll drop it in the chat. And this was pre-COVID. And one of the things that they looked at was, we were talking about peak commuters and how there's a whole group of other people who use the system differently. You opened this with a conversation about connections, right? I sure feel really grateful and connected to the people at the grocery store who keep showing up and making sure that there's food there, and the people who deliver it, right? And 1 out of every 3 essential workers in the city of Seattle is a transit rider. So as we think about the lesson of COVID really being about our deep level of interconnectedness, knowing that a system that works for the people that we all count on, right? Who are more likely to be working on off shifts than a 9 to 5. And I really appreciate the Department of Transportation at the City of Seattle and King County Metros. Like, that's why we have a really the great OWL service, right? There's late night bus service. We have a system that still works on the weekends. All because what we know is that in addition to it being, I think, imperative that we provide transit for the people who need to get around, that we do so in a way that provides a predictable and reliable commute or travel for people that we all count on too.
That segues maybe into my next topic I wanted to cover, which is the West Seattle Bridge. Thinking about the peak commute that we used to experience, or people who lived in or worked in West Seattle experienced. I think some of you here are West Seattle residents, and probably many of our folks on the call live or commute to and from West Seattle. For the next year and a half, that high bridge is going to be closed. The peak commute to and from the peninsula is going to be very challenging, and I think we know that because it already is somewhat of a challenge, even with the teleworking being at the rate that it is now. As people do start to return to offices and do start to commute again, what do employers, property managers, businesses need to do to try to keep congestion down and people moving efficiently?
Well, I'll take that one. That one's probably mostly for me, right? And maybe Bill can chime in a little bit on the metro side as well. But obviously the West Seattle Bridge continues to be a long emergency for us, and at SDOT and in the region. And we're working as quickly as possible to restore the transportation connection. I think as we emerge, hopefully, from the pandemic, likely before we have reopened the bridge to traffic, as you mentioned, it's going to take sort of all of the above to address some of the challenges that we might face. And one thing that has been so disruptive, I think, for the bridge, along with the pandemic, is just the taking people out of their normal routines and trying to help people navigate the system to be able to make choices differently if they're able, and thereby reserve space within the street for people who don't have other choices but to drive on and off the peninsula for work or for medical appointments and things like that. And we continue to make investments that mitigate the worst of the impacts, but there is no way for us to restore transportation connection or sort of make capacity for 100,000 people that used to cross the bridge every day. About close to 20,000 on transit. And we've done things like reserving the low bridge for freight and transit to make sure that that remains a reliable pathway. But thinking about how we can connect people with the resources we can provide, and then where and how we might need to continue to lean into those mitigations as we have more demand, because it's already, it already is pretty unpleasant to commute on and off at various points of the day. That could get worse. My sense is that as more and more people need to travel, we'll also be able to have transit be more of that backbone of our system that it was before, and sort of why it's so important for us to be able to emerge from the pandemic with our investments in transit largely intact. We've been able to make great progress in projects in West Seattle, including the Del Ridge Rapid Ride project. Hopefully that sort of aligns with when that continued investment in travel time and reliability for people taking transit will align with when there is more demand on those transit services as well.
I guess just briefly, the only thing I would add to that is that Metro is watching West Seattle like a hawk, and West Seattle is very clearly a microcosm of the recovery as a whole. And so as we try to put all the puzzle pieces together and prepare for various possible paces of return to normal, we're looking at West Seattle extremely closely. And in fact, West Seattle right now, Sam alluded to this, the capacity is not there, and that's something because of something that we haven't touched on, which is that buses can carry so many fewer people than normal. So I think we might get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, one other bright spot recently, right, was this transportation benefit district vote, which I want to touch on next. We talk about the funding for great off-peak service across the city. That was something that I know that was a priority of recent years, was to increase the number of Seattleites who have access to frequent all-day service, and we had a lot of success with that. This TBD vote, 80% or just over 80%. I think the highest, one of you told me on the prep call, that was the highest sort of pro-transit vote that we'd had ever in the city's history. Coming at a time when many people are not riding transit, yet there's, I suppose, an optimism, or at least a knowledge now that having a robust transit system is so critical to keeping the city moving, that even during this pandemic, people overwhelmingly supported that measure. Alex, what does that say to you about where the public's mindset is when it comes to transit?
I will quote my good friend Bill Bryant and say that it shows me that the people of the city of Seattle are in a love affair with transit. Right? You were right to point out this is not only one of the highest levies in Seattle history, this is far and away the highest percentage support for a transit measure in Washington state history, and some of the highest ever seen in this country, which means that the people of the city of Seattle are their faith and their belief and their mandate, their expectation to have a public transit system that is fast, frequent, reliable, and affordable, and that meets not only their needs, but importantly, voters see transit as a social good. It meets the needs of the people that they care about, which is their neighbors, essential workers, young people, low-income folks, people of color, that the people are expecting their transit system to be there waiting for them when they're ready to get back to it, and that they are willing to continue to invest. There is, and this is true across the nation. We saw that overwhelmingly the transit ballot measures have a 92% win rate in 2020, which means that across the nation, people are ready for a 21st century transportation system. And if you present it to them in a way that has a great series of investments that they can believe in, and in a way that really centers what they're getting out of it and who will benefit, those yes votes will come pouring in.
Yes, Sam or Bill, do you want to comment on that TBD vote, what it means for your agencies to have that renewed funding?
Yeah, well, certainly I think it's a reflection on the effort that we've all put in to make the transit system better and to make it useful. And I think that goes well beyond what SDOT and King County Metro are doing in conjunction, but really goes to how it is part of part of how people get around the region. And I think that's down to a lot of the folks on the other side of this screen as well, doing the work that everybody does to make transit part of what we are as a city and a region. And so I also I think for all of the rosiness of the STPD vote and the what Alex was citing across the country, I think we really have to acknowledge that we could be facing a transit crisis if there's not action at the federal level. And I think the CARES Act funding to support transit and continued investment in transit over the course of this year has been nothing short of fundamental for being able to deliver on and sort of leverage the voter approved funding that we also provide as residents of the city. But that runs out at the end of January. There are systems across the country, and it will affect us in this region too if we don't end up with figuring out what and how we make transit part of the solution in terms of recovery as well, with support from the federal level.
Alex and Sam said it really well about the national likely currently occurring transit crisis. That's a very real thing that needs to be addressed on the federal level and within the individual states and cities. But King County Metro certainly hopes to be able to lead the way as the industry recovers across the country.
Yeah, I mean, getting back to the point, I think, Bill, you mentioned before, we haven't really touched on yet, but another difficulty for transit riders and for providing transit service right now is the need to maintain social distancing on board vehicles. As we move through recovery, as vaccines roll out, hopefully those limitations will be increased, and we can eventually get back to having full buses running again. Until then, what can folks on the call do to help use this system as efficiently as possible while we're in this kind of crisis mode?
I guess
I'll kick that to Bill first.
So right now, a regular 40-foot bus that normally has 35, 40 seats and can carry 60 people fairly comfortably is limited to 12 passengers. And similarly, a 60-foot articulated bus with 50 seats that can pretty easily carry 75, 80 people is limited to 18. And so there is virtually no way that we could correct for that if traffic was anywhere near normal. So, we just have to assume that, and I think it's pretty safe and logical that as the COVID starts to appear in the rearview mirror and the vaccine takes hold and people get more confident about traveling the streets and sidewalks, that travel demand will increase at about the same rate as the social distancing requirements are relaxed. So we are looking at Metro, at least, we're looking at different scenarios for bus occupancies ranging from, like half of a seated load to all the way on up to a full capacity load. And we have very little control over social distancing standards, but we certainly are going to do our best to correlate the return of Metro service with those capacity limitations.
I just want to give a shout out to the agency, King County Metro, and the agencies across Washington State. There's 32 of them that have really prioritized the safety not only of their riders, but also of the workforce that makes transit possible, the operators and the folks in maintaining these buses who are, have to be out there, the frontline workers, absolutely. The pivoting and the hardship around the social distancing while still being able to produce a system that is creating or providing trips for 150,000 trips every day, and the innovation that they're showing in terms of the provision of masks on board and innovations around the fare collection and driver protection is it's really astounding when you kind of take a look back and be like, wow, look at everything that we learned and did in order to be able to preserve our system and make it safe for the people who are really counting on it. So I guess I would just really commend the agency and the Department of Transportation for all that it takes to do that, and thank the voters and the people on this call for recognizing that a full bus is a very different thing. There's sort of this boogeyman in transit advocacy, which is the empty bus just rolling around. And I really appreciate that people are able to absorb this information, that what may look like empty, if there's, 6 people on it, is actually a half capacity bus. And that it'll have to stay like that so that we can protect workers and riders.
When it comes to moving, a big number of people back to an office, let's say a downtown building or a downtown office, right? I mean, it used to be that was about 45 to 50% transit on any given day in Seattle. That's more than 100,000 people, right? Or more than 150,000 people on any given day. There's about over 300,000 jobs in Seattle's center city. If telework stays at the rate that it is now for, let's say, another 6 months to a year, what should employers, property managers, others that are managing a commuting workforce that's potentially coming back, what kind of time horizons should they be considering when it comes to really expecting people to be able to use transit versus expecting everybody to be driving? People who are managing smaller parking supplies especially are probably wondering, when can most of my folks get back on transit? Is this a year out? Is it 6 months? I mean, are there some key indicators that we should be looking for going into that? Is there any kind of early sign that we should be looking for of when that could happen?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the question of the day, the $10 million question. And I'll come back just first to the idea that people's confidence in the workplace, in going out in public, in riding transit, in doing all the things that they normally would do. I think one of the best assumptions, and it's not perfect, it's not assured, but is that those things will start to return simultaneously. And as workplaces open up, it's not as if every office downtown is going to open up on Monday, August 1st, but as people start to return, as the restaurants come back online, as all the businesses that cater to the weekday lunch crowd come back online, as the shopping destinations come back online downtown, I think we will be seeing the social distancing requirements relaxing at the same time. And that will allow us to carry more people on the bus. One thing that I didn't quite answering your previous question was, what can people do to make the best use of the existing capacity? And I think Alex actually covered it, which is, just kind of recognize that a bus that looks empty isn't actually empty by today's standards, unfortunately. And I would just ask people to kind of, it's a COVID era version of what you do normally when you try to avoid traveling at the very peak of the peak. It's like if there's a time period when you see that the bus tends to be full, metro buses, if you keep your eyes open for this, you'll probably start to notice it. Drivers now put up a sign on the reader board that says full bus or bus full. And if that's happening at a time when you typically travel, then I'd say try traveling at a different time. But if you can, but we've also been adding a lot of buses you'll see buses running in tandem and things like that we've been doing to really try to compensate for that, but you can only do so much. I wish we could do more.
Yeah, I mean, I think if 2020 has taught me anything, it's to not try to make predictions too far out in the future. And I think that, but I do think that similar to what Bill said, the confidence that people will have and the ability to provide capacity will match the need to have people return to some of those work sites in larger numbers where people are currently telecommuting. I think in that transition period, it's going to be challenging, and sort of how to, making sure that people do reserve the limited capacity now for those who absolutely need it, and don't try to rush back into some of these locations while still, the economic life of our downtown really depends on having people come back. We've continued to make investments in walking and biking as alternatives too, and really trying to use things like our Stay Healthy Streets, like, we installed new bike lanes on 4th Avenue downtown this fall, making sure that people who can choose whatever alternative there is to driving have that at their disposal, and making it safe for people to walk, bike, and take transit. I think it will be interesting to see how the public health guidance evolves on transit. There still doesn't seem to be transmission within transit systems. The transit systems like King County Metro have done so much to enhance cleaning and really work to look at ventilation systems and things like that. And so I think we also want to make sure that we reinforce the message that transit is safe. It is a safe mode of travel, and continues to be, and that everything that the transit agencies are doing is towards that end of making travel safe around the region. And they've already done remarkable things over the course of this year.
Yeah, I'm just going to follow up on your point about active commutes really quick as a sort of an outlet valve, especially in the near term as transit capacity is reduced. One of my favorite factoids from that I've learned from my time at Commute Seattle was going back 2 cycles ago for Modesplit surveys. When we looked at the companies, these are the CTR affected companies that had the highest share of employees that were biking to work. There were a relatively small set of companies that had 5 times the city average of people biking to work. And they were in different kinds of jobs and industries. So it wasn't necessarily just that something about the people at those companies that was different. What we looked at these companies, they were on or very close to bike paths, number one. Number two, they all had, and this is something that folks on the call, many of you have done or can do, is that these companies or their buildings had set up really great amenities for people biking to work. Some of that was things like just, covered bike storage, some extra things that bikers like to have, like places to dry their clothes, places to plug in their e-bikes, set up a secure location in the parking garage. A lot of these things are really low cost to set up, but make a really big difference in incentivizing those active commutes, which can take pressure off of parking and off of transit. The background rate for bike commuting in Seattle right now is something like 3 or 4%, but some of these companies have 15, sometimes 20% of their workforce biking in. And if we could expand that to more employers, it would transform commutes citywide, and especially in a pandemic, giving people a socially distanced, healthy way if they're able to roll or scoot or use any kind of, wheeled mobility device of their preference to get to work, it will make a big difference. So just want to put that plug out there for active commuting as well. But Alex, you were going to say something else on that.
I'm going to build off your point, Kevin, because that was a good one, which is that, people who aren't still on transit will come back to the system when they're ready and when it's safe. And the job of the people of Sam and Bill and the people on their teams and a whole bunch of other people who aren't here right now is to keep that system running so that when people are ready, it's ready for them. That it's safe, that it's convenient, that it's reliable, all those things you talked about that, that make biking a good choice for people, that we can do that for transit too. And we are in, allegiance and solidarity with the people, the participants here who provide Orca passes to their employees, who encourage their employees, similar to the way that they do with biking, they encourage their employees to take transit as a good choice. So all of us as an ecosystem in our respective roles, which is to make, I push and challenge these guys to make their systems as great as possible. They are implementing, the voters are supporting, and the people who are participating in this call are encouraging. And together, what we will be able to do is to keep a system whole and keep a system ready for the future growth that is coming. Because, one thing, I think we might close with a conversation about the future, right? But we are about to enter an extraordinary golden age of transit in the Puget Sound region. Unlike it is a Cambrian explosion of transit with some 26 new light rail stations opening in the next 4 years, and the associated bus service that will bring people to that. So I would just encourage people to stay home, wear a mask, but don't walk away from the idea that transit is still very much the future.
That's great, Alex. Thanks. And I want to open it up for the audience now to get their questions in. And I want to kick it to Nick from our team, who's been moderating the Q&A box.
Thanks, Kevin. So we've got a lot of great audience questions, and I think we'll be able to get to all of them. This one was in regards to something Bill said earlier about Orca programs, and just a curiosity of how much do employee pass programs like Orca for Business underwrite or support the ability for transit agencies to provide reliable transit for essential workers, and what will that look like going forward?
What it has looked like in the past is much easier to answer than what it's going to look like going forward. But Orca passport sales are incredibly important to King County Metro's bottom line. And, we're talking somewhere in the area of 60% of all of our fare box revenue comes from Orca passport sales. And maybe the central challenge that we're going to have as the recovery takes place is going to be to continue to show the clear value that transit has. Employees across the region place such a high value on that Orca card as an employee benefit. And so how do we keep that message front and center? It's a very accurate message. There aren't that many things nicer to have in your pocket than an Orca card that can get you anywhere at any time around the region. So how do we keep that value front and center, even if some of the externalities change, such as maybe there's a little lighter traffic during the peak, so the transit doesn't quite have the advantage that it has had, things like that, while also continuing to encourage reasonable, healthy mixes of active commuting for those who are within range or able to cycle, and a reasonable mix of teleworking as well.
Excellent. Moving on, this is sort of a two-part question, and Bill, this might also be for you. One is, in regards to the Ride 2 pilot that was in West Seattle, is there any plan for that to be reinstated, or any other options for connectivity, especially kind of in regards to the water taxi? And then the second part is, will Via to Transit remain funded for the South End neighborhoods like Othello, Rainier Beach, et cetera?
Yeah, I would have been surprised if we'd gotten very far without another question related to West Seattle. So the Ride 2 that King County Metro piloted in West Seattle didn't produce the results that we were hoping. Ridership was low. But now, there's the West Seattle Bridge situation, and we've been looking along with SDOT and other partners at the entire range of what makes the most sense to do to get people to the water taxi, to get people to the sea line, to just maintain the flow of people across the Duwamish to the peninsula. And we've started to zone in a little bit more on maybe improved water taxi shuttle buses rather than the small vehicle Ride 2 sort of approach. So that would be my short answer, is that larger vehicles we think are going to do a better job getting people both to and from the peninsula, but also to and from the last mile of between home and the water taxi on the West Seattle side. As regards Via in Southeast Seattle, I don't have the specifics on that. We are continuing to operate that, and we've been working with SDOT. SDOT's a partner in that program. So it's been, there were a lot of conversations that we weren't able to completely have until the SDBD passed in November. And I believe that the sort of midterm future of Via is part of that conversation. But I can certainly get somebody more specific information if they'd like to contact me separately.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's right, Bill. And I think, now that we are through the vote and the 976 challenge, we have a bit better ability to plan for where and how we spend those new resources as well. And I think just echoing the what we've done between the city and Metro through STBD and other partnerships of trying service out and seeing what is useful, and then being ready to lean into that if it's working well, or pull back if it's not, I think has been a part of the foundation of our partnerships together as agencies, and really trying to make sure we're delivering on our commitments to voters, but really trying to make continue to innovate as departments and figure out how to provide services to users.
Awesome, thanks, Sam. So giving Bill a break from some of the Metro specific questions, we'll get back to those. This is a really excellent one. What more can employers do to expand active transportation methods in Seattle for their teams?
Well, I think Kevin touched on a lot of those really well earlier, facilities and, but some of it's even like information for employees. The number of people who started to ride a bike now during the pandemic, where they didn't really know the routes, but having lower traffic levels, or felt a bit safer to do so. Really figuring out how, as people do come back, if they have the information they even need that's up to date. We've continued to make changes and make investments in connecting out our bike network and really making it safe for all ages and abilities. A lot of people who probably aren't biking now are not biking because they're cautious, or they don't know even what a company might have to offer, how to get into the bike room in their office when they come back. So thinking about what types of information we can help provide, or companies can help provide to their employees. I think that's also probably a place where Commute Seattle would love some feedback on what types of information, and that they can work with us and the partners at the city to sort of figure out how we help share that. Early on in the pandemic, I know there were bike and the West Seattle Bridge closure, there were sort of bike trains coming from West Seattle into downtown, just to help people navigate that, navigate what's somewhat complicated and illegible system the first time you do it. And then once you do that, it's a great way to get back and forth.
Yeah, I will add to that, and I'm dropping yet another link in the chat for people. This region has some of the nation's leaders in businesses making it easy for their employees to get to work using active transportation. This is an article about Seattle Children's, who I think is kind of well recognized in our industry as really the vanguard and the leading edge of that. So not only are they providing people with that transit pass, but part of their onboarding process is how exactly you're going to use it. The HR professional walks you through what your commute can look like if you are choosing active transportation. And then, so they're giving people the access, they're giving people the information, and then they take it one step further. I'll also say Expedia and others are doing this as well. They will pay you. So every day that you don't take a car to work, you get $4. And like, who doesn't love money, right? That's why we all go to our work. And there are other ways that people can do that. The Gates Foundation rolled out and saw a big mode shift in their employees when they went from having a monthly parking pass to a day rate. They saw a ton of mode shift as people had to make that decision every day. Whereas if they bought it once for the month, they were, kind of incentivized to use parking. So there are a variety of ways that employers can be not only facilitating, but encouraging and supporting their employees to choose the healthier, more reliable, and less stressful way to get to work than driving and sitting in traffic.
I would just add one thing to this, actually, that I didn't mention earlier, which is that, Seattle has some micromobility, providers out there on the streets with bikes and scooters right now. And this is a great way for folks that might be hesitant to, give it a shot and make that capital investment of a new bicycle, which can, frankly, be quite expensive. To try a scooter, to try a bike, they're sort of e-assisted as well, so that makes getting up the hills a little bit easier. But that's a great introduction for folks. And so if companies can provide, some connections for that, or gamification around that, or challenges around, give it a shot. There's and Sam's right. Commute Seattle does promote this during Bike Month. And we have promotions at various times of the year. We just ended one, in fact, we always do a fall bike event to kind of celebrate, staying safe during these darker days while we're out there, and how people light up their trips. So stay connected with Commute Seattle on this, because we do have information for employers and property managers on how to incentivize those kinds of trips. But I will say, taking advantage of these micromobility providers, whether it's Lime or others that are out there, with several new ones coming up on the scooter front, is a great way to get people trying it out for the first time.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is a great question to sort of shamelessly plug, reaching out to a specialist at Commute Seattle that you're familiar with, whether it's CTR or Orca, and we can either assist you via free consultation or point you in the right direction to resources that you're seeking. Moving on to our next question, Sound Transit recently released a tool to see capacity on the Link Light Rail trains so that people can plan their trips according around that. Is there any plan to implement a similar tool on Metro or other transit authorities in the region?
So we're probably not going to have it in time for the pandemic, which is a good thing. It means the pandemic won't be going on too much longer, but if I'm accurate here, but we are working on that. It's sort of the holy grail among transit agencies as we look at real-time schedule information, building that up to include real-time load data. And so we do have a project underway, and that is in the cards. I expect to see it with a fairly high degree of confidence within the next 2 years, but it won't be before this pandemic is behind us. I'll just add that there are a number of rail systems across the world, really, that have that tool available, and it's a great tool. It lets you decide, I think I'll have that cup of coffee before I go to the bus stop or to the rail station, because I see that the next train is extremely full or the next bus is extremely full. The following one has plenty of space. So that helps people self-regulate. It'll be a great thing.
Thanks, Bill. So I think we might have time for one or two more questions. This one is sort of a theoretical one. So obviously the pandemic has sort of laid bare some of the obstacles for funding transit that we've had, just based on significant revenue drops and drops in sales tax. So what are folks' thoughts on longer term regional funding solutions for transit in our area?
That's me. We knew before this that the funding that is available for transit in particular is inadequate, inflexible, volatile, and regressive. And that hasn't changed due to the pandemic. In fact, it has just exposed that that is the case. So less than 3% of the state's transportation budget goes to transit in Washington state. So let's start with where the money's kind of not coming from. And it's also definitely not been a major point of investment from the federal government. Sam brought up a little bit of the help that has been provided by the CARES Act, but I think what we're looking for is not a bailout. We're looking for reform on that matter. And that means that 87% of most transit agencies in Washington state get their funding from local municipalities, either through sales taxes or the vehicle license fee that we just got back with the overturning of 976. But the other role that the state has is in providing great tools for local municipalities to use in order to raise the funds in order to make decisions about the kind of transportation systems that they want. So what we're looking for is funding that is progressive, resilient, adequate, and flexible. And so what we hope to see are new tools from the state of Washington that invest at a higher percentage in transit capital and operations, which would be a sort of a new source from the state. We're looking to see reform to the kinds of tools that are available for municipalities and other governments to use as they go to their voters about how the level of service that they want to provide. And we are hoping to do so in a way that we can fund the Metro Connects, which is King County Metro's long-range vision and their plan for what they hope to see for transportation by the year 2040. I mentioned that Sound Transit is doing this explosive build out of the light rail system. And what we know is that if we have an adequate level of investment from the federal government and the state, as well as more flexibility in the kind of resources that we can generate locally, we can fund King County's Metro Connects and fundamentally transform how mobility occurs in King County. It is a visionary document that will put a high level of households within fast walking distance of fast, frequent, reliable transit. It will get people to light rail. It will complete the alphabet of the rapid ride system. And as I said, it is nothing short of transformative. And so what we need are more sources, more tools, some reform, all of which Transportation Choices Coalition is excited to be marching down or logging on to Olympia this year, seeking in partnership with our coalition to have this year and years going forward.
What Alex said, I don't think there's any more that needs to be added there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alex. You're right. That was a great question for you. I think we're about at time for the audience questions, but Kevin, I think you had a final question for our panelists and some closing remarks.
Yeah, I just I want to thank our panel again. I want to thank everyone for attending our event today. Maybe by way of a final question, I would just ask the three panelists here, looking ahead and again, at the end of a very challenging year, looking for a silver lining on the transportation front, how can the folks on the call, how can they partner with your agencies? How can they work well with you so that we do end up with a future where commuting maybe is just a little bit easier, a little bit less of a headache than it was in the past? I think, I hope that that's not too tall of an order, and that I think Bill mentioned in our prep call, let's not let this crisis go to waste. What can we do to end up somewhere better than the place we left behind?
I'll go ahead. Every great city has great transit. And every great city has great bus transit as well. And the downtown area and other parts of Seattle and the region are really in a world of hurt right now in many ways. And as this recovery takes place, it's like, how do we use this crisis as a springboard to get to an even better place? Seattle was essentially shaped by transit, as were many cities, but Seattle certainly was. And how do we continue and increase the level to which surface transit is really integrated into the cityscape? So that's really the first thing that comes to my mind in response to that question. As far as working together between collaboration between Metro and our private business partners, so many of you at this meeting today, I would just say that Metro is continually trying to improve the level of information that we can provide to our customers, and that very much includes your employees. And so we've done a pretty good job in the past, most people would say, but we're doing an ever better job. And as we go through this recovery, we would really like to be marching with lockstep in you to get the information that your employees need to know that they can feel safe and to know that they can count on Metro to get them to work on those days when it's too dark and rainy to bike, or on every day for those that large plurality of downtown employees that took transit on any given day prior to COVID. So, but thank you very much. I've really appreciated this opportunity. It's been fun.
Thanks, Bill. Sam, you want to go next?
Sure. I guess building on what Bill said, I think, I think the partners in this meeting and everything that everybody has done around helping people transform their commutes, we need to continue to get feedback and information about how that will continue to evolve. I think one thing that neither the city nor Metro nor Sound Transit can there really is no return to normalcy in the way that it was, because I think there will be some new normal that is created when people come back, and we want to be able to support people having flexibility, being able to take advantage of some of the teleworking that they've been able to do, but also make sure that we're providing high quality service and serving the needs where they are. So really that's something that, governments can sometimes be slow to respond to those types of changes, and making sure that we have open dialogue and figure out with employers and employees like how to respond nimbly and flexibly to those things as they start to emerge. So, there were some questions in the chat and the Q&A about, as people bring more people back to work sites, I would encourage you on the employer side to figure out how you're asking those questions, along with the sort of workspace safety types of questions that I'm sure you're also grappling with, and that figuring out how we can help exchange information on that helps us plan for and support the return to job sites as it's safe to do so. So, I think those types of partnerships that we have through Commute Seattle and other venues, we're very happy to hear about ways that we can work to support employer initiatives and vice versa.
Yeah, I just building on all of that, I guess my thing would be keep the faith. Bill harkened back to our history about being, a transit-rich community, a city in a region that was built on transportation. And that's going to be the future too. I've referenced a couple of times, right, what's coming down the way. And I truly believe that an active transportation system with a robustly funded transit system that is prioritized in our right-of-way is the future. That is what is going to be good for our economy. We know that it's good for businesses to be near transit. We know that it's good for employees and employers to choose transit. We know it's what's right. It's what connects people to opportunity in a way that is equitable and can catapult families out of poverty. Harvard did a study that showed that the number one way that a predictor of households getting out of poverty is access to transit and the distance of their commute time. It is what is important for our planet, right? We have another crisis that is a bigger shark coming, which is our climate crisis. We saw that with our wildfires, and we know that it is going to be extremely expensive and very difficult to have any semblance of normalcy if we don't really roll up our sleeves and get innovative and courageous about what we're going to do about that. And so I would just invite everybody on here to continue to be a transit supporter, to encourage your employees to do so safely, and to recognize that what our short and midterm looks like is not the same thing as the really bright long-term plans and investments that we can make in really getting us to a 21st century transportation system that more accurately reflects Seattle's position as a world-class city.
Great for closing us out. Thanks, Alex. And just finally, for those of you on the call already engaged with us, thank you very much. And we invite you, as we're working through the recovery, to continue engaging with Commute Seattle and our specialists to help you think through and plan for how we're going to move through the recovery in terms of the commute together. For those of you who are maybe new to our programming, please visit commuteseattle.com. Reach out to our staff. Our services are free to businesses, property managers, really anyone in Seattle looking to solve commute challenges going forward. So we hope to hear from you, see you at our future events, and thanks so much for attending today. Thanks again to our panel. Everybody keep staying safe. Have a great holiday season. See you guys.